Leigh, I'm going to open it up with you. I don't even know where to begin on commercial fishing issues because what we were talking about before, it seems like something new is happening every day. So I'm going to let you take us to the issues that you think right off the top are most pressing, most interesting. So why don't you just jump in?
Great. Happy to do that, Jason. I'm going to touch on a couple issues that we talked about at our previous webinar prior to the election and sort of give a state of play of where we are now. I think some of the things I'm tracking will overlap with some other panelists on here today. So I'm going to let them take the lead on that, but may have a back and forth a little bit later on. So the first thing I'll start out with is 30 by 30. This is probably forefront of many fishermen's minds these days. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with that phrase, it is the global initiative to protect 30% of lands and waters by 2030. So here in the US, some states are pursuing state 30 by 30 initiatives, but at a federal level, we sort of first saw this initiative gain steam last fall here in the US when the chair of the House Natural Resources Committee, Rep. introduced the Ocean-Based Climate Solutions Act. He introduced that October 20th, so just ahead of the 2020 election. So we talked a lot about that last fall on our webinar. So that bill had prescriptive language for establishing highly to fully protected marine protected areas in the US. So any commercial extraction, including commercial fishing, would have been prohibited in these areas according to the bill text. The fishing industry pretty unanimously opposed this language. We had a letter signed by more than 830 participants throughout the seafood supply chain, expressing concerns with that language. So
that was some kind of record, as I recall, in terms of having that many people in the seafood industry sign one letter.
Yes, it is a notoriously fractured industry, and so I think to see that level of consensus was pretty rare. So we fast forward to January 2021. Joe Biden has won the 2020 election. He was inaugurated on January 20th. And a week later, on the 27th, President Biden issued his executive order on tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. This EO outlined in pretty broad brush strokes requirements for the Department of Interior regarding U.S. implementation of 30 by 30. So namely, Interior was responsible for issuing a report within 90 days to the EO that included recommendations for implementing 30 by 30 in the US. So between January 27th and when we saw the report issued on May 6th, NOAA held listening sessions. The fishing industry provided comments and recommendations to Department of Interior on this initiative. And we finally saw a report published on May 6th. That report was called Conserving and Restoring America the Beautiful. And this report laid out a pretty compelling vision for collaborative conservation. It really focused on sustainable use that produces social and economic benefits now, but also safeguards biodiversity for the future. And notably, the report, and I quote, specifically emphasizes the notion of conservation of the nation's natural resources rather than the related but different concept of protection or preservation. So we were very pleased to see sustainable use recognized in the Biden-Harris administration's approach for 30 by 30 implementation rather than just sort of a roping off of 30% of our oceans to any sort of extractive use. So now NOAA is working to develop an NPA atlas. A variety of stakeholders, including the commercial fishing industry, are working with them to sort of chart the path forward for what 30 by 30 implementation is going to look like, what counts as conservation. And there are a range of protected area sort of designations, anywhere from like low protection all the way up to fully protected. So I anticipate we will see a range of options presented to pursue. So that's sort of where we are.
Let me stop you for a second on that.
Sure.
One of the things I find amazing about this 30 by 30 stuff is that there are so many machines moving at the same time on the same issue, right? Both in the administration and in Congress. And back in October, what the seafood industry, that the commercial fishing industry saw was frightening, right? Because it was very prescriptive. It didn't seem to recognize any kind of nuance at all in the issue. It just seemed to be very blanket oriented. How do you feel things have changed since then? Do you feel like it could still slide back into what you saw back in October, or do you feel like things are moving in a more positive direction for the commercial fishing industry?
That's a great question. I think things are moving in a much more positive direction for the industry. We've been given a chance to weigh in on what the process is going to look like. Like I said, NOAA has held listening sessions. Department of Interior has been willing to receive comments and recommendations from the fishing industry. So there has been much more of an emphasis on stakeholder input and sort of collaboration amongst stakeholders on this initiative. So we have a seat at the table, TBD on what that looks like in 6 months or 2 years as this kind of rolls down the path. But I think we're feeling pretty good about the Biden-Harris administration's prioritization of including the commercial fishing industry. I mean, we are explicitly named in the executive order, and there was throughout the Interior report, there was an acknowledgement and recognition of the role of sustainable use in this larger 30 by 30 initiative.
Okay, all right. What else do you have going on that you want to talk about?
So the other kind of big thing is MSA reauthorization. I think that's been a big thing for many years, and we're still trying to get that over the finish line. So the Magnuson-Stevens Act.
MSA, yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, Magnuson-Stevens Act, or commonly called the MSA, is the federal overarching fisheries law that governs any fishing activity in federal waters here in the U.S. So that covers 3 to 200 nautical miles. 0 to 3 nautical miles are state waters. So we're really kind of focused on those federal waters in the MSA. It was last reauthorized in 2006. And in that bill, they authorized funding through 2013. So technically, the law has expired, but it is, like I've said, it is the overarching fisheries law. The Congress is not going to stop funding it. But there is sort of this desire to reauthorize the bill, so it's not technically an expired bill. And for things like this, it is oftentimes good to kind of put in updates as new technologies come online, new challenges arise in an industry, et cetera, et cetera. So since 2013, we've seen multiple attempts to reauthorize the bill. And in fact, the Modern Fish Act, I think, passed in 2018, late 2018. And that amended the Magnuson-Stevens Act, but it wasn't a wholesale reauthorization. So the most recent attempt has been led by Representative Jared Huffman. He's a Democrat from Northern California. He is also the chairman of the House Natural Resources Subcommittee on Water, Oceans, and Wildlife. So we like to call that the WOW committee. So he began hosting listening sessions around the country in late 2019 to sort of hear from the fishing industry, different stakeholders in different regions about what their challenges were with current fisheries management, where they envisioned improvements happening, what they wanted to see change, what they wanted to see kind of maintained in the law. COVID obviously put a hold on those listening sessions starting March 2020. But the congressman did finish up the last of his listening sessions last fall, and he made it to almost every region in the country. And and put out a draft MSA reauthorization bill this spring. Solicited feedback on that. We provided feedback, a number of fishing industry folks provided feedback, a whole number of ENGOs provided feedback. So it's a very open process. And now he is hoping to introduce a bill in Congress, hopefully soon. In the next few weeks, we've been sort of waiting for this introduction to happen. Things are just moving slowly in Congress, and getting the bill drafted is a beast of a job. So we will likely see that bill drop in the next few weeks. And, Rep. Huffman has committed to having an open and transparent process. He wants to continue to work with stakeholders across the industry and, environmental NGO world. So we expect there to be sort of a normal process for this bill. So committee markup. And through that process, Huffman has stated that he really wants feedback to continue. He wants to improve this bill. He has been working hard to make it bipartisan. So we'll see how that all plays out when he introduces. I think the likelihood of action happening in the Senate is probably low. And I only say that because we will likely not see a fisheries bill be given floor time. Of all of the things that the Senate is trying to tackle, fisheries is sadly not high on their priority list, but understandably so. So it would probably have to pass via unanimous consent, which is a procedural move in the Senate where basically every senator just checks the box and says, yes, this is fine to pass.
On the House bill itself. The House bill would be looked at, yeah. And things just feel pretty polarized right now. And so I think I have a hard time envisioning a bill that could get all 100 senators to check off on it. But this legislation has been hitting a wall for years. I mean, MSA reauthorization. When did you say the last one was passed?
2006, 2007.
Wow. So we haven't had one since. And what is it that keeps stopping this bill from moving forward?
That's a great question. I think it's a variety of things. Fisheries has traditionally been very bipartisan. I think we have seen an uptick in sort of tensions between the recreational fishing community and the commercial fishing community, and sort of a desire to manage recreational fisheries differently. It is hard to capture very precise and accurate data from such a huge population of anglers. And so there's been changes in how that data is collected. And we're starting to sort of see some of those changes down in the Gulf of Mexico. I think jury's still out on how effective that sort of change in data collection, how helpful that change in data collection will be. So I think, we are trying to address some of the concerns of the rec fishermen. But I think there's still a desire on their part to see sort of a different management scheme that makes the commercial fishing industry very nervous. We are one of the most highly regulated industries in the country. Every pound of what we catch is reported and can be sort of tracked through through the processing facilities. So I think we are wary of letting sort of a more unaccountable sector kind of change how they're managed for the sake of getting more fish. So there's some tension there, but I'm hopeful that we can figure out a way to address their concerns while also keeping a very strong management system in place, including catch limits, rebuilding timelines, some of the core conservation tenets of the Magnuson Act.
Okay.
Yeah, but like I said,
Okay.
fisheries has traditionally been a very bipartisan topic area issue. So I am hopeful that we can sort of get back to a more bipartisan working relationship on these issues.
Jessica, I'm gonna jump over now. We've got about 6 minutes left. Thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation. I'm gonna move over now. We have about 6 minutes left. I've got two questions and a point being made in the queue here. I'm going to go with Noah Oppenheim's first here. And Noah, how you doing, man? I haven't talked to you for a while. He writes, as recently as last week, June 16th, the House Natural Resource Committee Democrats wrote a letter to the president that states, among the key takeaways from the DOI report, we particularly appreciated the report's focus on conservation outcomes rather than on prescriptions. This is a significant dovetail from 30 by 30 policies embraced by the committee last year. And Leigh, I'm going to ask you this question. Are you there, Leigh?
Yep, I'm here.
All right, so here's the question.
Figured this was coming my way.
Can you see this one on the screen? The question is, how can the fishing industry help House Natural Resources and others develop and champion outcome-based policies for ocean conservation, and how might an outcomes-based approach apply in other aspects of fisheries policy? I'm so glad you're taking this and I don't have to answer it.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this question. First, I guess I'm going to operate under the assumption that an outcome-based policy or outcomes-based approach is like a 30%, like some sort of threshold, like goal-based policy. And then, I think secondly, this letter was, well received in the fishing industry world. I think the committee has recognized that they maybe need to have a little more outreach to the fishing industry, and like clearly we're going to show a united front when something is potentially going to impact our collective ability to operate on such a huge scale. So, I think continued outreach, like we work well with the House Natural Resources Committee, the Senate Commerce Committee. I think a lot of us here on this call do a lot of outreach and are in pretty much constant communication with folks on the Hill. So, I think kind of just continuing to raise our priorities, our concerns with these staffers and members is huge, and will go a long way. But I also, there was another point made, I think, just right below this question. The mayor of Gloucester made that said, we just want to be represented in the decision making, and we just want a seat at the table. And I think that is a really great point. Annie did a really great job hitting on that in terms of offshore wind. I think as we start to see increasing uses in our federal waters, as we start to see new bills introduced about ocean conservation, I think our sort of overarching ask is include us in the process, whatever that might be, whether it's a siting process, whether it's developing a process to implement 30 by 30, whether you're looking at shovel-ready restoration projects, whether you're looking at restoring or protecting working waterfront areas. Like all of these things are going to impact the commercial fishing industry and sort of the larger seafood supply chain. So I think like as we move forward, our job here, like folks, Lori and Margaret and Annie and folks who are representing the industry, our job is to make sure that the Hill is hearing our voices. And really the Hill's job is to figure out a way to incorporate these voices into a process.